What are some of the lessons that you learned from your first marriage that'll help you keep the second marriage from ending the same way? Over the last 50 years of my life, I've been married twice. The first marriage lasted almost 17 years. The second marriage has been running strong for 11 years. It's odd to think that I've spent almost 60% of my life married. According to the Census Bureau, 40% of first marriages end in divorce. For couples married before the age of 20, 50% of them end in divorce in the first 10 years. I was 19, almost 20, when I was married for the first time. Honestly, I had no business getting married at such a young age. Someone had given me what I now consider to be bad advice. Get married and have kids when you're young so that they're moved out of the house and you've got the whole place to yourself for the rest of your life. I'm sure the advice was given with the best of intentions, but there are a few problems with it. The first problem is maturity. A typical male brain doesn't finish developing until around age 26. The female brain doesn't finish maturing until around age 24. So things like decision-making, impulse control, and planning haven't even completely set in until you're about 25. The second problem is that during your younger years, you're probably making the least amount of money that you'll ever make. So you mix the combination of low wages and immaturity, and you have a high potential for a rough start to an adult life. This isn't the best time to be planning a wedding, getting married, setting up a new home, or even having children. In 1995, my wife and I were both making $4.25 an hour. This was the foundation for a financially rough life, first living with relatives and then with roommates. At the age of 20, we had our first child, a son. Almost 2.5 years later, we had a daughter. The timing of both was horrible planning and clearly not thought through thoroughly. Shortly after my son was born, I started a trend that would continue for the rest of my first marriage. I would drive an hour to school. When I got home, I would go to work at my first job, a computer store, and then I would go to work my second job delivering pizza until midnight. I'd sleep for about 6 hours and then I'd be off to school again. This trend of working multiple jobs, side hustles, and even running my own computer company kept me away from my family quite a bit. I did all of this in the name of supporting my family, but over time, it strained the relationship with my wife and with my children. After 16, almost 17 years of marriage, we divorced. This started a phase of my life that I wasn't ready for. I quickly discovered that quite a bit of my ego and self-worth was tied to being a husband and a father. But we'll talk about the parts about finding myself in a future video. The most important part is how we handled the divorce. Through the next few years, we worked to co-parent together and to keep things as amicable as possible. We didn't involve lawyers. We worked out the child support and the alimony within the court guidelines, and we kept it reasonable. I picked up extra work where I could, and if she needed help with the bills, I would do what I could, even sometimes calling utility companies to make payment arrangements. We worked out visitations and did our best to share the kids and the kids' events. We both made it a point to never speak badly of each other, especially around the kids. Some people tend to forget things like this during a divorce. I can tell you that my respect for my ex-wife didn't sit well with girlfriends, but it was a must for my children. A few years later, I met the woman that would become my second and hopefully last wife. I told myself that this time things were going to be different. And to do that, I had to learn some new habits. One of the first things I did is I started working on myself. I started reading books or listening to audiobooks. Books like The Richest Man in Babylon to work on my finances. The Alchemist to work on my view of the world around me and how it affected me. How to Win Friends and Influence People to work on my attitude and work on my outlook towards others. I went through 20 or so books working to improve myself. For my work life, I would stay closer to home and I'd be more present with my new family. For most of the 11 years in my second marriage, I've worked from home. Taking kids to and from school, attending school programs and events, conferences, helping with kid duties while the wife was at work. From my financial life, I used to work extra hours and extra jobs to make up for poor financial habits, so it was important that I prioritize my finances, our finances this time. After reading The Richest Man in Babylon, a fantastic book by George Clausen, I decided to start following the 7 cures for a lean purse. With this, I started saving money. Now, most of this was just making sure that I was using the retirement fund options that I had at work. We cut back our excess expenses, and I know that you will find this to be absolute shock to hear, but apparently you don't need to pay $100 a month for cable, or $20 a month for Netflix, or $20 for Disney, and whatever other subscriptions I had. I know, I was shocked. I managed to take my credit score from 496 in 2016 to nearly 700 today. At the start of the pandemic, I'd managed to get my credit score to the golden 625. So it's time for this 5th cure for a lean purse. Make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. I was tired of renting, and the house that we were renting was being sold by the owner. This was the 3rd time in my 20 or so years of renting that the owner had sold the house while I was renting it. I'd followed the first 4 cures, and so now it was time to move on to the 5th cure. This was especially important because during my first marriage, a mortgage agent had told me that I would never own a house. Now my wife will have, as the book says, a spot to raise the blooms that gladden a woman's heart. Thus come many blessings to the man who owneth his own home. And I can say that I fully agree. Definitely not the last lesson I learned, but the most significant lesson I learned was about how to treat my partner, my wife, differently. During my first marriage, I was a pretty standard husband. Not overly affectionate, waiting until Valentine's or holidays to show my affection. This was one of the first things that I changed. Now, I seldom leave or enter my house without showing some affection to my wife. We don't even celebrate Valentine's Day because we show our affection every day. Now maybe it's my age, but this next one has been a big game changer. I no longer pick fights or yell at my wife. Now that doesn't mean I never yell, because I definitely do, but if I do, it's usually to try and calm the situation, not to make it worse. I don't think that my wife and I have even had a fight about anything in probably the last year. This is something that I think is huge for a relationship and sets a great example for the children. Now, these have been some of the biggest changes that I've made in my second marriage, but it's also about the little things as well. Getting the wife her favorite candy bar or her favorite water. Stepping in to do the little things that make her life easier, like running to the store so she doesn't have to, or maybe doing the animal chores on the weekend so that she can sleep in. In the end, it's all about thinking about your partner as much as, if not more than, you think of yourself. I hope that you found some of this information to be useful. Please learn from my mistakes and use the stories of my missteps to improve your own lives. If you found this to be helpful, maybe you'll enjoy this video over here about how and why I've started this channel. And remember, be good to one another.